So this is his second appearance. He was here last year. He's back again for a second helping. Pierre Sabak, ladies and gentlemen.
Right, can everyone hear me at the back there? Is this, can you hear me? Yeah. Yes, no? Right, do you want a bit? Right, is that better now? Right, okay. The research that I'm presenting today is based on my work which I'm currently writing at the moment, and I'm anticipating that it's going to be released in 2016, which is Holographic Culture. And this book really looks at the extraterrestrial phenomenon and argues that this phenomenon is ancient in its origins. Now, complementary to this material is also a box set of DVDs that I recorded with Anthony Beckett, and that's a series of lectures, and I'm anticipating to release that sometime in 2016 as well. So today I'm going to be discussing ancient aliens and flying saucers. This is a depiction of, if you like, an ancient vessel, and we're going to be going into the symbolism, in particular the comparisons to flying saucers. So I'm going to be contending today that this is a very ancient phenomenon. So I'm going to look at the controversial possibility that the aliens are not passive observers, but instead have infiltrated human life and are an intrinsic part of the fibre of society. So I'm going to actually say that they actually coexist in they coexist and live amongst us in what I would define as a parallel society. So the implications regarding alien intrusion is a staggering argument, and for the most part is hardly ever entertained within modern ufology. So I think a lot of people who study ufology just say, well, this is a crazy idea. But I think it's an hypothesis which is really worthy of study. Particularly when you get into the ancient symbolism, the idea that aliens are interacting and engaging with human beings becomes a very credible theory. So in this lecture we will examine the real possibility that the visitors have inserted themselves into human civilization and its social institutions, the bedrock from which we are all governed and managed. The two main questions that I would like the audience to think about today are as follows. What is the nature of this alien incursion, and who are the winners and losers? And as we can see on this slide, we can see that the church, or the edifice of the church, traditionally is said to be instituted by angels. So we'll look at this symbolism. But the profound implications of the research that I'm presenting today is that once these missing pieces are factored into the study of religion and anthropology, the conclusions regarding the alien agenda offers nothing short of the complete reappraisal of one's cultural and political identity. So I'm saying that basically the ramifications of, if they are here and they're engaging with human beings, then really one has to begin to address one's belief systems, and that obviously as encompassing knock-on effect. So in short, the conceptual landscape that humanity has been conditioned to believe is real, and perhaps more importantly, the disclosure of an alien occupation will transform how you view and interact within the world. It is hoped that by engaging with the philosophical ramifications of an alien presence and its evaluation within antiquity, the analysis will lead to the integration of knowledge, forcing the creation of new paradigms that better explain the phenomenon. So one of the reasons why we engage with ancient symbology is to try and understand this phenomenon better. And in order to do that, then we need a new set of language, a new type of vocabulary. So now that I've introduced and touched upon some of the underlying themes, I want to focus the remainder of my time on addressing the fascinating subject of ancient aliens and flying saucers. Now we saw this slide earlier on today, and it's a depiction of what's known in the biblical tradition as the Ophanim. Now the term Ophanim means those that belong to the wheels or those belonging to the circular ones, and is a depiction of the angelic host. And obviously there is a correspondence there with a flying saucer. So I think the similarities are very apparent. Now, the media term flying saucer is not a new name that was invented in the middle of the 20th century, but in actual fact dates back much earlier and exists as a part of an occult tradition that is encoded both in the Quran and the Bible. So today we're going to look at this occult tradition, and we're going to try and deconstruct the language and try and understand the signification of what this occult tradition could actually represent. So, counter to popular belief, the discipline of ufology, it's not modern. It's actually very ancient. And once we begin to look at the symbology, we can begin to discern that this phenomenon is extremely old. Thank you. So, let's have a look. So the work which I present today is based upon years of original research and is unique as I look into the occult tradition of the flying saucer, a classified subject that originates from the classical world. And I want to go into the etymology of the word classical, because the classical tradition is really a classified tradition. Now, if we look at the wording, the word classic means naval, and it comes from the etymology classis, a fleet, army, or a political class. Now, the definition alludes to the malach, which is an angel, but in the Hebrew, the word malach is a polymorphic word. It also means a sailor. So here we're referring to what is also known as the Ben Sira, the son of a boat. The son of a boat is this angelic lineage. So we can see this relationship in English between the word class, which is one's upbringing, obviously whether one originates from an angelic class, and also that which is classified and which is secret. And so this pertains to an occult tradition, something which is actually hidden. So today then we're going to look at what I've termed as Skaphology, which is the study of angelic boats. And this is a redacted or a hidden tradition. So this tradition, it just does not exist within classics. It has been redacted out. But I'm going to contend today that in order to understand UFOs and to understand the symbolism, then you have to begin to look at the signifiers of vessels within the ancient tradition. So I want to look at the idea then that in Roman society, the classical representation of mankind and his political structures is not so much formulated upon what is known in modern UFO scholarship as a breakaway civilization. This is a civilization that is technologically advanced and which has excelled completely beyond recognizable measure. But today I'm going to contend that it's rather it's fueled by an organization that is depicted more accurately as a parallel society. And we find reference of a parallel society within the biographies of Plutarch. He wrote a book called Parallel Lives. Now, the emphasis of Parallel Lives was actually making reference to this parallel lineage, this lineage which is alien, which is angelic. And today I will use the term angel and alien, and they are actually interchangeable. So, for example, the Aramaic word zari, which is an angel, also has the additional meaning of an alien. It also means a visitor or a stranger. And it's very interesting because when we look at the picture of this pulpit, for example, we see this strange circle which is elevated above the pulpit. Now, this circle actually represents the Ophanim, those belonging to the wheels. So this has a connotation of the Elohim. So this then is the crux of the analysis. If you want, we've got two distinct lineages. We have the Ben Elohim, which are the sons of the gods, and then we have the Ben Adam, which is the son of man. And as I said before, Plutarch actually makes reference to these dual lineages. So, to reiterate then, the extraterrestrial conspiracy is thousands of years old and is embedded within the political structures of mankind. In a manner of speaking, it is not out there, but in actual fact exists closer to home. Finding out, therefore, about UFOs from the government is an intractable problem, as disclosure has been concealed not for the best part of 50 years, but for millennia. And we can argue that actually what we've had is really partial disclosure. And this partial disclosure is actually thousands and thousands of years old. So we'll look, therefore, at the problem directly and examine the ancient definitions pertaining to the descendant of a vessel, which I said is ostensibly an angel or an alien. and we'll look at this idea. So I'm going to today divide the lecture into 8 components, and these components all are represented, are illustrations of different types of angelic vessels which appear in the Bible, in the classical tradition, and also in the Quran. So the first part of the lecture will look at ships, and second part we'll look at the Ophanim wheels, the godly chariots. The third part we'll look at the lamps. Now it's quite interesting, but the Ophanim, the word Ophanim comes from the etymology ophan, which is a wheel, but it has this additional meaning to spin, and there's a root connection with ophir, which is to shine. So these are shining wheels, spinning wheels, and these wheels are sometimes, particularly in the Hadith tradition of the Quran, are represented as lamps. So often angels are depicted as lamps, these angelic vessels. We see how this ties in the Babylonian tradition with the depiction of eagles. Now the eagle is significant because the Aramaic word nissa, an eagle, has connotation of nessa, which is to abduct, and therefore the eagles are shown with what are represented as seed receptacles, but the idea of the basket is that it's actually lifted up into heaven. And this feeds into the next section, which is angelic baskets. Now the basket also, within the Greek tradition, for example, is also depicted as a barrel. And the barrel has this connotation of a shining vessel, and we'll look into that in more detail. Now, underlying the barrel is also the representation of a shield as well. So deities are often depicted in conjunction with the shield. Now, the signifier of the shield is that the word oplon, a shield, is related in the Greek etymology to pleon, which is a boat or a vessel. So the shield actually represents a ship. And we see this comparison also, for example, with theos, a god, which is related to thurios, which is a shield. So typically the deities are shown with its shields. And an extension of that idea we find within the Sibylle cults, in which Sibylle uses the symbol, and again the symbol is evocative of the shield being interchangeable with the saucer. And lastly, we'll look at the Holy Grail, which is the flying saucer, which is also depicted, believe it or not, in the Bible. So during the course of this lecture, I shall try and offer a brief summary of each of these categorizations, and in addition we shall also look at the word flying saucer, a designation used in the Bible to denote a godly vessel. And we see here in this illustration that Mary is depicted with a vessel. This is as a connotation of an angelic vessel. We see also the halo. So the halo has this connotation of the Ophanim, which is the shining ones, the spinning ones. So veiled behind the symbology is this idea of this other bloodline, which is related to a boat or a vessel. So I want to look at the etymologies pertaining to angels and ships. Now, this list here, believe it or not, has taken 13 years for me to research. And so although it looks very simple, it's actually involved quite a lot of work in terms of figuring this out. But we can clearly see that in the biblical tradition that Sabaoth, which is translated as the angelic host, is correlated with a sailor, specifically Sevet, which is a crew or a crew member of a vessel, and Teva, which denotes a ship, which is sometimes translated as an ark. And indeed, in the biblical traditions, Noah's ark is classified as a Teva, which would obviously relate this to the Sabaoth, which is the angelic host. And again, within the traditions of Moses as well, Moses' receptacle in which he's placed on the River Nile is Teva, which is an ark. So the encoding behind this is actually an angelic vessel. Now, of course, Yahweh Sabaoth is the Lord of the host in the biblical tradition. And of course we see there's a correspondence with Sevet, which is a crew, but also within the Arabic also we see a correspondence or a wordplay with the plural noun Jawa, which is ships or host. So again, Yahweh is the Lord of the host. And I think that this is particularly reiterated when we look at the correspondence between Malak, an angel, and Malak, a sailor, which of course is related to Mekal, a container. Now, in the Semitic and the Greek traditions, the word vessel works in a very similar way to how it works in English. So we would say a vessel meaning a container, but also the container is a type of ship. So we see that there's an encoding there with the angel and a container or a ship or a vessel. Sometimes this container is depicted as a lamp. Now with the seraphim, we see that there's a seraphim coming from Serapha, which is fire, but there's a correspondence there with Sapan, a sailor, and Safina, which is a ship. The word Safina appears both in the Arabic and the Hebrew etymologies. Now I alluded to the Zari, which is an angel or an alien, and the word is polymorphic. It has the additional meaning of a visitor or a stranger, but the word Zari also means it is closely aligned to Zar, which is a naval captain, and it again is used in the biblical tradition to refer to Yahweh Sabaoth. So sometimes he is actually referred to a naval captain, which of course is correlated with Sirah, a boat. So I think we're seeing here that there is actually a general pattern. And again, if we want to go into the Canaanite traditions, Baal, a lord, is related to Bachar, a sailor, and Mabar, a ferry. Now, if we go also into the Greek and the English, we will find the same word plays. And I refer to these as polyglottal puns from the Greek etymology, poly, many, glottus, tongues. So these are word plays which are encoded in multiple languages. And so we can see that the word angelos, which is the Greek word for angel, is related to ago, which is to lead or to direct, and agion, which is an oil vessel. Now, oil is very symbolic because olive oil is flammable, and so sometimes lamps are used to depict shining vessels within the occult tradition. Now, another Greek word which appears both in the Bible and also the classical tradition, and I'm sure many of you will be aware of the archons. The word archon, an angel, is related to now Arcos, which is a naval captain, and Olcas, which is a large cargo ship. And in fact, the word Olcas informs the Latin word an ark. Now, it's traced usually through, not through the Greek, but the correct, if you trace it correctly, you can find that there is this correspondence between Olcas, which is a large cargo ship. And again, in English, the same wordplay. We see that the word fairy is related to a seafarer and a ferry. And also we can say that it's related to the word fiery. If we applied that to the seraphim, we would say that the seraphim is equated to a fairy, the seafarer would be equated to Sapan, the ferry would be equated to Safina, and fire would be Serapha, which is fire. So we're seeing these correspondences within the wordplay. Now, importantly, the Noble tradition is aligned to naval and navis, which is a ship. And this is because within the Semitic traditions, there is this correspondence between Malak, an angel, and Melech, a king. And we would use this encoding within English to describe kingship. Now, the idea of a ship is actually identified with this angelic lineage. And so this is very important. So I want to just emphasize then that in summary, the angels are crew members of naval vessels and take on many of the superficial characteristics of modern day aliens. An important theme of the angelic sailor in the biblical tradition is that the angels are said to reside in the sky on naval vessels, and that they're a type of a military ship that bears all of the hallmarks of a UFO. And we find Jeremiah in the Bible, he refers to the Lord of the host is his name. Now, the Latin word host means an army, but the etymology is coming from the Hebrew, Sabaoth, which is host, Sevet, which is a crew of a naval vessel. So here we're dealing with an aerial host. We're dealing with the Elohim, the high ones, or the Ruach Elohims, which are the high spirits. But the Ruach Elohim are typically also identified as living animals. So they are very similar to human beings in that they have a spirit or a soul, but are also physical entities. Now, a central tenet within biblical symbolism is that the angel is featured as a mariner and is encoded in the Hebrew definition. So we said that there is this wordplay between Malak, an angel, and Malak, a sailor. But we see also that the reference to the sailors is not just something that I'm actually making up, but we're finding this also within the biblical text also. So, for example, if I quote Ezekiel. Now, in Ezekiel passage, he writes, "And they shall know that I am the Lord of the host," which is Yahweh Sabaoth, "when I have set a fire in Egypt, and when all her helpers shall be destroyed. In that day shall messengers go forth from me." Now, the word here is Malak, which is an angel. So in that day, messengers shall go forth from me in ships to make the careless Ethiopians afraid, and great pain shall come upon them as in the day of Egypt, for lo, it cometh. So there's a specific reference in the Bible to the idea that the angel is actually resides on a vessel, and this is a very important idea. So we find the same idea also within the Quran as well. And I just want to quickly deconstruct the etymology within Ezekiel's reference to these angelic vessels, because he uses the word sea, which is a fleet, which is related to the word sir, an envoy, and sira, which is a ship, which is of course specific to Zari, which is an angel or an alien. Now, within the Quranic tradition also, we have these references to angelic vessels, and indeed within the Bismillah, which is the opening passage of the Quran, which is often used as a verse, the Bismillah is often drawn as a type of a ship. This obviously corresponds with the idea of an angel, which in today's idiom would be very reminiscent of a flying saucer. And we'll discuss this correspondence in a moment. But if we quote the Quran, and this is found in Surah 42, Al-Shura, Consultation, verse 32, we find, among his signs are the ships sailing like floating mountains. So there you have it. And again, we've got another reference of the Bismillah, again, which is an angelic vessel. So, in the passage of Al-Shura, God's envoy is depicted as an impenetrable host, and according to the prophet, the Lord's vessel, though powerful, are not impervious and can be destroyed, to continue with Muhammad's quotation. So this is another important idea which is found in the Quran. So if we look at the quotation, it states following on, from among his ships are the ships sailing like floating mountains. We also have, if he willed, he could bring the wind to a standstill, and they, his ships, would lie motionless on the surface of the sea. There truly are signs for this for anyone who is steadfast and thankful, or he could cause them to be wrecked on account of what their passengers have done. Now, their passengers here is quite clearly a reference to the angels. God pardons much to let those who argue about our messengers know that there is no escape for them. And just again, we've got another Bismillah opening passage to the Quran on the left, which again is depicted as a vessel. Now, to deconstruct this passage, we can argue then that these ships are otherworldly, and that the angelic ships and their hosts are governed by the command of God. And in the Quran, Muhammad insinuates that the angelic vessels are remotely controlled, prescribed by God's authority. So we could argue here that actually they're telepathically controlled. Now, perhaps more importantly, and missed by theological commentators, the admission that God's ships carries voyagers suggests a living host, and it's emphasized time and time again that the Ruach Elohim are living creatures, the high spirits. And if we render the word spirit into the Arabic, we would get the word jinn. So these are living creatures. Now, according to the Prophet Muhammad, the angelic vessels, though powerful and beyond measure, are crucially susceptible to damage by the Elohim and are actually depicted as physical and mortal objects. In the words of the Prophet, he could cause them to be wrecked on account of what their passengers have done. Passengers being angels. So I think that is quite an explicit passage. So these then are not spiritual devices, and their representation as ephemeral ships in the scriptural tradition is purely metaphorical. Once again, the Quranic passage emphasizes a living agency that archaically is attributed to the veneration of the Malak Elohim, which are the higher angels. And indeed, God is sometimes referred to as a Malak Elohim, a high angel. Now, in the Quran, the angelic vessels are described as destructible objects, and thereby definition proves that the angels are physical beings rather than abstract entities that float around heaven. So within the Hermetical tradition also, we're finding this similar comparison also. For example, the daemons are often depicted as physical. Now, according to Gnostic thinking, the daemons are not just intransient entities, but are also physical beings, an important idea that is found in the Hermetica Codex. To quote Stubalius, excerpt 4, Hermes to Tat. So he wrote, "They do not possess bodies made of some special kind of matter, nor are they moved by soul as we are, for there is no such thing as a race of daemons distinct from other beings." And we can see this idea primarily depicted within sculpture. So, for example, the angels are often depicted as copulating with human beings. Now, in this depiction, this person is depicted as a farmer. In the Greek, Ger Earth is related to an husbandman. Now, if we apply that wordplay, this is known as diptych paranomasia, where we transferred wordplays from Hebrew into Arabic and vice versa. But if we look at the etymology Adamah, Adamah means the earth and is related to Adam, which is a man. So there is this correspondence between the Ben Achadam, the son of man, and the Ben Acheloim. And obviously their joint progeny, which are the Nephilim, which is a different lecture and a totally different subject. We could save that for another day. But in Strobelius's dating from at least the 1st century AD, the superstition that the daemons and archons are not material entities is firmly refuted and are said to possess physical bodies. And that's a very important idea. It's obviously a tendacious and emotive subject, and the idiom that mankind has been hoodwinked into worshipping living entities from other worlds is an ancient theme within the world's religion that has been suppressed. As I said, that this is a classical or a classified tradition which pertains to angelic vessels. And so we're going to look then at the relationship between worship and angelic vessels. Now, if we look at the wording itself, and these are polyglottal puns, so they are transferred into many different languages, we find that the encoding worship encodes the idea of a ship within English. But the same idea is also found within the Greek. Proskuneo, to worship, is related to the Greek word skuos, which is a round vessel or a saucer, and is used specifically within the classical tradition to refer to an angelic vessel. Again, proseukomai, to pray, Greek okema, which is a vessel, coming from the etymology to carry. In Latin, canere, to sing the praise of, is related in the Latin to canoa, which is a canoe. Arabic also, Sabah is to praise, Arabic Sabaoth, which is the ship's host, the angelic host specifically. Again, within Arabic, Salah is to pray. It's a polymorphic word. It also means a basket. And we're going to look at the idea that in the Semitic traditions, the basket is a seed receptacle. But obviously, Salah, basket, is correspondent with Sira, which is a boat. In Old English, Worthing Skype, Old English Skype, which is a ship. And obviously, the English literary word as well, bak, which is the word for a ship, bacchanal, which is a drunken celebration. So immediately we're seeing that there is this correspondence. Now this correspondence is also found within the places of worship also. So for example, in the Greek, naos, a sanctuary, is related to nos, which is a ship. The same comparison, for example, would be found in the word oikos, which is a house, dwelling, or a temple, and olkas, which is a large vessel. So the temples themselves were predominantly figured on ship iconography, and therefore this ship actually reflected angelic vessels. The concept was that the vessels were moored in heaven, but that their correspondence was also reflected on the earth. And I think you will find also that they buried these artifacts. So, for example, at Delphi, you've got the omphalos stone. Now, the word omphalos is a polymorphic word. It also means the boss of a shield. The shield is used in the classical tradition to represent an angelic vessel. So you've got the omphalos stone, and buried underneath the omphalos stone, is an angelic shield, whatever the angelic shield is. But ostensibly, the shield, as I argued at the beginning of this lecture, is a ship or a vessel, because there's this correspondence between oplon, which is a shield, and pleon, which is a ship or a vessel. Now, I want to move on now. I've sort of given you a little taster. I want to move on to specifics and deal with the Ophanim. Now, the Ophanim are found within the Bible, and generically the term is translated as wheels. The wording actually means those belonging to the wheels. And there's this correspondence with the chariot within symbology also. So I want to now look at Ezekiel's vision. Ezekiel is a prophet, and he refers to the Ophanim, those belonging to the wheels or the circular ones. Now, in his mystical experience, which is equated with ascension, the prophet encounters with an Ophanim, and it's virtually identical to the phenomenon of alien abduction, and is a comparison worth considering. Now, rather significantly in this passage, the prophet also describes the spirits, the Ruach Elohim, as living creatures. So here we're not in any ambiguity. The Ruach Elohim, which are obviously the high spirits, because of their ability to dematerialize, are also considered to be physical beings. So Ezekiel writes, then the Spirit took me up, and I heard behind me a voice of great rushing. I heard the noise of the wings of the living creatures that touched one another, and the noise of the wheels over against them, and a noise of great rushing. So the Spirit lifted me up and took me away. Now, on the slide, it's not very clear, but often with the depiction of the Ophanim wheels, you see that there's eyes which are dotted around the Ophanim wheel. Now this is very important because within the Greek language, drakon is from the etymology drakos, which is an eye, and refers to the seraphim, which in the Arabic is shaf, which is to see, but the seraphim is another classification of the jinn. So we've got the wheels, and we've got a correspondence also with the word plays as well. So if we look at the word plays, we can see that the wording Ophan, a wheel, which is also to revolve, is correlated with Ophir, which is an obsolete term for gold, and is used to also denote the root to shine. Pana, which is to turn around. Now, one of the obvious ways of depicting the angelic wheels is as a type of chariot, and this symbolism appears frequently within Hellenistic and also biblical symbolism also. Now, on the Greek vase we have Helios, which is the sun god, but we're seeing embedded within this symbolism is this idea of a chariot. So we've got veils within veils, we've got astrological encryptions, but behind these encryptions is this fundamental idea of these angels which correspond with vessels. And we find that the correspondence is found also within the Hebrew. So for example, the etymology Merkabah, which is a chariot, corresponds with the word Markab, which is a ship. So the chariot can also be rendered as a ship. And also the Hebrew word Kaba, which is an angel or emissary, in the Old Semitic would correspond with Keb, which is a serpent. We would find the same correspondence, for example, in the Latin. Angelus, an angel, would correspond with angui, which is a serpent. So we're seeing then that there is, if you like, this duality between the Bana Adam, the son of man, and the Bana Elohim, the son of the gods. So this leads us on now to the idea of lamps. As we said before, the wheels themselves are shining wheels, they're spinning wheels, and one of the ways in which these wheels can be represented is typically with the signifier of a lamp. So in biblical and Islamic scriptures, the Ophanim wheels are ascribed to God's host and are pictured additionally as a type of shining lamp. Divine, these lights are identified in Hellenistic depictions with an olive barrel, a container that is theoretical to a ship. We will look at those etymologies in a moment, but I just want you to think about that if you look at an olive, with an olive, you make olive oil. Olive oil is flammable, so oil is often used to denote the shining ones, hence it's used to anoint kings, but it has this connotation of these shining angelic vessels, which in the Greek tradition is also related to the barrel, which is otherwise a container or a vessel. It also corresponds very neatly with the symbology of the Ophanim, the wheels. Now, heavenly, these ships are represented as circular or round vessels, a comparison which is evinced in the following word lists. So we can see, well, first of all, we'll just look at the slide. So within this depiction, Odysseus is shown as sailing on these barrels or on these vessels. So there is this correspondence with this idea that the vessel is a type of ship. But we're seeing also within the wording also, if we look at the correspondence within the Greek, Hebrew and Aramaic, we're finding similar polyglottal puns. So for example, Orkima, a carrier vehicle, is related to Orkos, which is a ring. In Hebrew, that correspondence would be found between Teva and Ark, ship or vessel. Tabat, which is a ring. Aramaic, as I said before, the Ophanim, which is an angelic vessel, is related to Ophan, which is a wheel or a circle. So, in the Hellenistic tradition, Oklos, the host, is headed under an archon, an angel or a ruler, and is represented with orca, a barrel. This is where the symbology gets quite difficult, but if you imagine that the barrels contain olives, that the olives themselves are related to olive oil, and olive oil is therefore flammable, so it has a connotation both of a lamp but also of a barrel. And we can see within this medieval depiction that the barrel is traditionally identified with a ship. In this respect, this would be an angelic vessel. Now we're also seeing that this is a red flag. The Hebrew word Adam, red, is related obviously to the Adamic lineage, and we're seeing that the word there is also a lion as well, so Lavi, a lion. There's a connotation of the Levitical or Levite priesthood, but ostensibly, the barrel is corresponding with a ship, and if we look at the word in oklos, a rabble, host, or multitude, it's a marauding host. So it's a host that rapes or pillages, but we find that it's related to orkos, which is something round, orka, a barrel, orkema, a vehicle or a carrier, which of course has a connotation of an archon, the Greek word from the Greek root arcane, to rule, which is an angel or a ruler, and of course there's that relationship with orkas, which is an olive, which discloses a bright vessel or a seed container. So I want you to think about that this symbolism is very complex, and it's also very layered, and it's predominantly figured on polymorphic symbolism. So in other words that have multiple meanings. So if we look then at the angelic vessels in the Christian and Hermetical traditions, we see that the word angion, which is a small vessel for carrying oil, a container or receptacle, which has this connotation of a shining vessel, is related to angos, which is a jar, pail or cinerary, and angelos, which is an angel or a messenger. Now within the Egyptian symbolism, for example, the barks or the ships were depicted as lamps. And if we go back, let's say, to the jinn also, the jinn are said to reside in a lamp. Now, the lamp is a vessel or a shining vessel. And so we're seeing then that there is this interrelationship between the jinn and the angelic host. They are one and the same thing. So, we also see then that there is this relationship then between angion, which is a jar or a vessel, and analegion, which is to pick or to gather up. And again, spiria, a basket, is related to anaspa, which is to pull or to draw up. So in other words, the basket, which is a vessel or a ship, which is pulled up or drawn up into heaven. As we said before, the Hebrew word teva for the receptacle which carried Moses is related to Sabaoth, which is the angelic host. Now, this painting here is a painting which I copied after an artist, Lawrence Tadema, and I did this as an art student. But we're seeing the symbology of the boat or the vessel, which is the subtext or hidden within language. So, to summarise then, the vessel, jar, barrel or basket are each devices that are accorded to angelic ascension and are aligned to godly vehicles. The lighted lamp, a barrel or vessel, traditionally plays on the symbolism of the genie in a lamp, otherwise a container or ship, a hollow receptacle accorded to the angelic host. In Egyptian symbolism, the angelic bark is stylized as a lamp and is a tradition that unifies a deity, jinn and an angel. So they're all one and the same idea. For example, Serapha, which relates to the seraphim. Serapha is fire. The jinn are said to be born from the smokeless fire. And indeed, the word seraphim in the Arabic is traditionally translated as a jinn. Now, the seraphim is the highest order of angel. So there is this relationship between the jinn and the angels. Now, Muslim commentators often argue that the race of the jinn and the angels are a separate species. This is a very complex argument, but once you look at the ancient etymologies, the argument begins to break down. The argument that they are one and the same species is a very persuasive argument once you examine the original roots of the original words. So, interconnected with the idea of the basket, which is, as I said, a type of receptacle or a ship or a vessel. Traditionally, you also find the eagle as well, which sometimes is shown to carry a vessel or a basket. So if we look then within the Aramaic, we're seeing the symbology is very clear. We have Nissa, which is an eagle, which was used to depict angelic beings, but there is this relationship in the wording between Nessa, which is to lift, carry away or abduct. Now this is represented by the basket, which is lifted up, which is a type of receptacle. You need to be very fluid in your thinking because a vessel is a type of ship. And there's this wordplay also on the Hebrew word nakash, which is a serpent, and is demonstrated in what I define as a visio-paranomasia, or a visual pun. And so if you see the profile of the wings of this eagle deity, they represent the mouth of the seraphim. And of course, in Hebrew, the word nakash, a serpent, is a cognate of nekah, which is strange or alien. And as I said before, in the ancient Aramaic, the word zari, an alien, is also another word for an angel. And the word terminology is connected to Sira, which is a ship or a vessel. So the eagle, then, therefore, is a deity that snatches and is aligned religiously to the symbolism of the fish god Anas, a derivative of the Hebrew word Anas, a rapist, Arabic Hanas, a serpent. So we're finding, if you like, they may be using different symbols, but they're actually representing the same idea. So the eagle in Aramaic, Nissa, an eagle, Nessa, to abduct, Nakash, a serpent. Well, also in Hebrew, Anas, the fish god. Anas is a rapist because remember that the vessel or the receptacle is a type of seed basket, one which is lifted up into heaven, and is of course correspondent with Hanas, which is a snake. The snake appears as a depiction of the dragon, Drakos, which is from the etymology, an eye, which refers to the watchers. So there is then this alignment between Theos, a god, and Theoros, a watcher. We'd find the same alignment, and Phos, which is light, in Hebrew also, the same polyglottal puns. Erin is a watcher or a shining one. And this actually relates to the deities and to the gods. So both the eagle and the fish god are entities that in the Old Semitic depictions carry a seed basket, a container or a quantity. Now this is very an important idea, because not only did they represent these vessels as seed containers, but they actually depicted them according to different measurements or quantities. So different types of quantities were used to represent different types of angelic vessels. So, for example, the receptacle is termed in the Bible as ephaf, which is a measuring basket. Now, the word ephaf is a play on ophan, which is a wheel, so there's this correspondence between the wheel and the basket, which is a seed receptacle. And again, the word ephaf is used to grade a type of angelic vessel. Now, the classification ephaf, a basket or measurement of seed in symbolism, is aligned to ophan, a wheel. Otherwise, the ophanim, the round or the circular ones, those belonging to the circular ones, those belonging to the wheels. So, if we look then at the Hellenistic and the Middle Eastern depictions, the seed basket takes on a prominent place within the representation of the mysteries and the depictions of angels. And as we can see, we find this vessel here. This is used in a church, but we see that there is this correspondence with the eagle again, combined with the basket. The receptacle is a heavenly vessel, combined with the eagle, which is linked into the idea of abduction. Again, I want to draw some correspondences between the word ephaf, which is a seed basket or a bushel, which is a type of measurement, apha, which is a viper, and ophan, which is a wheel. And we see that the ascended cobra in the hieroglyphic, which would represent the Elohim, the high ones. But we see also that there's a depiction of what is a vulture. But the correspondence would be that Nissa can also designate a vulture as well as an eagle. So the symbology then is actually very complicated. Again, we've got Zeus impregnating Danae. Now we've got this symbol of this, if you like, this receptacle which is floating in midair. But remember that this is a seed vessel which is related to an angel. Now sometimes the depiction is sometimes shown as a shower of gold coins. Now the coin is used to represent the shields. The shield is an ancient signifier used to represent a deity. So Theos, a god, Thurios, which is a shield, which in today's idiom would be a flying saucer. But you can see how they are using visio-paranomasia in order to conceal fundamental truths. And this pertains to an occult tradition. This is a type of tradition that is hidden or which is concealed. Now, relating to the ephaf is another designation which is found in the Hebrew, which is the Chabad. So the Chabad is another word for ephaf. It's a different type of measurement. So if we want to be specific, it's a different grade of angelic vessel. Now, in the early Hebrew codex, Yahweh descends upon Mount Sinai in an object called a Chabad. Now remember, as we said at the beginning, Yahweh Sabaoth, he is the Lord of the host. Sevet, which is a crew of a vessel. Teva, which is an ark. So Chabad is a type of vessel. Now, in the Bible, as it is in modern Hebrew, the term is translated as glory. It can also mean heavy as well. So this is something which is heavy, which is glorious, it's magnificent, it shines. And so I'm going to read you now the quotation from the book of Exodus, chapter 24, verses 15 to 17. So we have, and Moses went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount, and the glory, the word is Chabad, of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days, and the 7th day he called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud, and the sight of the glory of the Lord was like devouring fire on top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel. So, I want to now spend some time to deconstruct the word Chabad, and then we'll go back to that original passage. So, according to biblical text, the Chabad is twinned conceptually in the Torah with the angelic ephah, a vessel or carrier, literally a basket. As I said, these are seed containers. Now, biblical scholars translate Chabad as glory and is etymological to the Hebrew word kavit, which is a barrel. So remember that the barrel can be used to represent a shining vessel, which has a connotation of an olive, which also can be used to represent both the Ophanim or a lamp within the biblical and the traditions of the Adif. If we look at this image on the slide also, we see that the angels are shown with a barrel. This is a seed receptacle, which is a depiction, ostensibly, of an angelic vessel, but this is a codified discourse. If you like, this is a private discourse. And we can see that this is termed as camera picta, which is a decorated or a vaulted roof. Now, the priesthood like to use polymorphic language because the wording also is polymorphic and also means the boathouse. Now, this tradition of using polymorphic words is also found, for example, within the Quranic tradition. In the Quran, you have what is known as Wuju al-Quran, the forgotten recitation. Now, in Arabic, the word Wuju al-Quran also means a polymorphic word. So this is a word with multiple meanings. And so therefore, we can infer that the Quran itself is written in polymorphic language, and it's a layered and a very esoteric document. Now, primarily, as we said, and as I showed within the quotations of the Quran, that the angels and the Elohim themselves are depicted with vessels, and that these vessels are physical or are considered to be physical devices. So now in the book of Ezekiel, the prophet describes the Chabad as like wheels within wheels, which of course he would, because he's making a reference between the spherical barrel, which is like a wheel. So we're seeing that there is this correspondence with the symbology. And according to scriptures, the Chabad receptacle is considered as a source of divine knowledge and is closely equated with a vessel, a heavenly ship that is featured in Judaic symbolism as the Ophanim wheels. Now, if we combine the etymological and the textual evidence together, it becomes increasingly evident that the heavenly Chabad, translated in the Bible as glory, is a type of vessel that is equated with the heavenly host. Now, the word Chabad, glory, the translation is fine, that there's nothing problematic with that translation, but I'm saying that underneath, subtextually, that the connotation is of an angelic vessel. And we'll go and we'll have a look at the quotation in a moment, but I'll just touch upon some of the symbolism of the barrel. So here we see that the monk is depicted with a barrel. As I said, that the connotation is of an angelic vessel, but also that the angelic vessel is aligned to a lamp or a light, which we see depicted at the lower left-hand corner. Again, we can see that angels on the right slide, that they're combined with barrels or receptacles, which to the priesthood, which are obsessed with symbolism, this depiction would infer a type of either seed receptacle or a type of angelic vessel. So we're going to now look at the translation of, if we're going to now take the word glory and replace it with the word vessel, because as I said before, the terminology glory really has this etymological correspondence with a vessel. And I showed you this idea right at the beginning when I said that the word worship is etymological to ship, as it is in Arabic. Sabar is to praise, Sabaoth is the angelic host. So in Exodus chapter 24, verses 15 to 17, and Moses went up into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount, and the vessel, which is Chabad, of the Lord abode upon Mount Sinai. And the cloud covered it 6 days, and the 7th day called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud. And the sight of the vessel of the Lord was like devouring fire on top of the mount in the eyes of the children of Israel. And it's interesting because we're seeing this symbology also conveyed to us within modern depictions of angels. So we see, of course, that the barrel is identified with a shining being, but obviously the alcohol here is depicted as a spirit, the spirit being the jinn, but the jinn is interconnected with the seraphim, which are the flaming ones or the shining ones. The seraphim are also known in the apocryphal traditions as the erin, which is a shining one or a watcher. As I said before, the correspondence in Greek would be theos, God, theros, a watcher, phos, which is light. So we have these depictions of angels which correspond with the barrel, which is a type of vessel. Again, with the worship of Artemis. Artemis is shown with multiple breasts, but of course this is a type of visio-paranomasia, or a type of visual pun, because this is showing an egg. Now, in the hieroglyphic, the egg is used to write the word Isis, which is the Egyptian goddess. And again, the conception of the egg is really showing the idea of panspermia, because the ancients believed that life on this planet were planted here by the Elohim. And again, this is conveyed in the vocabulary also. So, for example, neophytus, a neophyte, means the newly planted. Now, we see also with Artemis that she wears a basket on her head. Sometimes this basket is sometimes represented as a beehive. Now, the drone worker of the bee is militaristic. It has connotations of a hierarchy, and there's a very good metaphor for representing the idea of pollinators of worlds in which the Elohim themselves are depicted. So, now, again, we've got this interesting analogy also in Plutarch's Parallel Lives. Now, as I said before, the breakaway civilization within the ancient world was depicted as this parallel civilization. The parallel civilization coexisting simultaneous with human civilization. And we find this representation, for example, within government. We have the upper and the lower house. The upper house is traditionally represented by a shield. The shield is used to depict an angelic vessel. So, oplon, a shield, pleon, which is a vessel, or theos, a god, theros, which is a shield. Here we have this depiction of Diogenes. Now, the name of Diogenes means a separate race. Now, only very recently, this was a week ago, I was listening to a scholar on Radio 4, and she was recounting the story of Alexander talking to Diogenes, and the fact that Diogenes lived in a barrel. And she recounted it as though it was literal, but really we're dealing here with allegory, allosagoria of the speaking. Now, Diogenes is said to have walked around with a lamp. Now, as I said before, the lamp is traditionally used to represent the barrel, which is an angelic vessel. Now, we can see within this depiction here that orca, a barrel, although the wording ties in with oikios, which is a house or a temple, we can see that in this depiction it's not intended to be interpreted as a temple, because the temple is shown in the background. So this is understood to be an angelic vessel. Now, we can see also that we have an oak tree in the background, because the word oak tree comes from the word orchard, in which we get the word olive. So we're seeing that they're using, they're switching around the signifiers, but they're using the same ideas to represent this idea of a shining vessel. Now, Diogenes, he is known for being a cynic. So we got this wordplay between kunikos, which is a cynic, and kwan, which is a dog, which actually is used to illustrate Sirius, in which these deities are identified with. So this leads us on now very neatly to the shield. Now, I want you to get your head around the idea. As I said before, the shining wheels, the Ophanim, they are the spinning ones, they're the shining ones. They're depicted as circular or round, and that there's a connotation of a deity. Now, the deity traditionally is depicted as a serpent or a seraphim. And so, with the depiction of the deity, traditionally you'll find the shield combined with the serpent, which is a type of seraphim or a type of jinn. So in the ancient world, the breakaway civilization, more correctly a parallel society, at least its early inception can be traced to the Roman legend in which a shield is said to have tumbled from heaven. So this shield, as I'm arguing, is a type of angelic vessel. Now, according to the story, the nymph Egeria predicted that if preserved, the possessor of this article would become the dominant people of the earth. The story is relevant for our purposes as the shield in the ancient world is a signifier used to represent a ship and, in symbolism, specifies an angelic vessel equated with the host. Technically, angels are crew members of military vessels. So this idea that the Americans suddenly got a UFO in the 1950s is a ridiculous idea. And this idea that they're passive observers is also a ridiculous idea, because they're here, they've been here for a long time, they're encoded in our institutions, they're encoded within our languages. And it's important then to look at what the words of what these words actually represent and what they signify. As I said earlier, that there is this, if you like, relationship between Oplon, a shield, and Pleon, which is a boat. And we can see this symbolism on this Greek vase. So therefore, the boat is correlated with the shield. They're one and the same. So when you think of a shield, I want you to think of a ship or a vessel. Now, let's look at the word plays then. And so in Greek, it's very interesting because we have theos, a god, which is aligned to theoros, a watcher, therion, which is a beast, e.g. a dragon. As I said before, drakon is to watch, from the etymology drakos, an eye, which is very interesting when you come into occult symbolism with the all-seeing eye over the pyramid. The Arabic word haram, a pyramid, related to a harem. Hence, within the Egyptian symbolism, the pharaoh is shown with a triangular loincloth. These are not identified with, they're not tombs, they're actually harems. But we can see, getting back to the subject, we can see that theos, a god, is aligned to thurios, which is a shield. Thus, a god or an archon traditionally carries a circular shield, which is illustrative of a vessel. We're finding similar ideas also within the etymology arpui, which is an abductor. In the modern English, we'd refer to this as a harpy. Now, arpui is related to erpaton, which is a reptile, opolite, which is a soldier, which is the angelic host, opolon, a shield, and pleon, which is a boat or a vessel. So, quite clearly, we're seeing that there is this relationship between a deity and a shield, a circular vessel, which is connected to a ship. So the relationship then to a circular device, specifically a shield, is tangent in the modern languages to a UFO. And I think that when you begin to break it down, it becomes very obvious. And in the ancient idiom, the representation of a god, angel, or jinn, in a heraldic symbolism, the device of the shield is used to signify a noble bloodline, one derived from a boat or a ship. The connotation is of a sailor or mariner, esoteric of an angelic lineage. So, for example, we have this is a Roman depiction. This is of a consul, and we can see that he's connected with a shield. We would find the same symbolism within England, in which the shield is depicted on the wall, which is elevated. This is denoting an angelic vessel or an angelic ship. I just want to... I'm just going to quickly look at these etymologies of shields as well and try and just break down a little bit of this symbolism. So, for example, Daraka shield, the Arabic word, there's a correspondence with Drak, which is a dragon. We would find, let's say, that there's a relationship with the jinn also. Jinn, Old Semitic gen, which is a serpent or worm. As we said before, the seraphim, seraph, which is the serpent. Hence, the serpent is traditionally depicted with the shield. Sometimes it's depicted with a circle, which would be identified with the Ophanim or the wheels. And we've got the full Monty here, because we've also got the eagle as well, which is used to signify this idea of being stolen or being taken away. And again, we've got the basket, which is placed on the head, which is a type of receptacle. So the symbolism is fitting together. Now, another word for shield is mijan, and mijan obviously relates to a jinn. As I said before, the jinn also live in the lamp, and the lamp is a vessel, and the vessel is a shining vessel. So both the angels and the jinn are one and the same phenomenon. We're seeing the correspondence also with the Arabic word Hama, shield, Hamon, which is the angelic host, because, as I said before, the angels are depicted with shields. So the shield then fits into other, if you like, circular symbols within the Semitic and classical traditions. And we're now going to avail ourselves with the symbol. So I want you now to kind of get your head around the idea that, okay, As I said, it's very multifaceted. We've got the Ophanim wheels, which are the spinning, the circular or shining ones, but they're also connected to shields. The shield is connected to a vessel is connected to a lamp, and also we can find the same signifiers with the symbol also. So the shield then in the ancient world, as we saw in the last section, denotes an angelic vessel or a ship, and as we shall shortly see, is closely grouped with the depiction of a flying saucer in the ancient and modern world, and this is important. Now the Latin noun symbol, we'll go into the wordings. So for example, Sibyl, which is a vetes or soothsayer or a prophetess, we can see that the wording is a diptych paranamnesis, so it plays on the Arabic word Sibyl, which is a lion cub, and so the priestess is shown with a lion cub on her knee. As I said before, the lion cub actually denotes the priesthood, but of course in her hand she carries the symbol, because this is working on linguistic encryption. Now behind the symbolum, which is a symbol, is Simba, which is a boat. So again, you need to be conversant with the wording. They're not actually depicting a symbol, they're depicting a boat or circular vessel, to be specific, which is connected to a shield or a wheel. Again, we can see Cybele is wearing this basket-like structure on her head. Again, if we looked at the wording of Simba, a boat, it's coming from the Greek root kumb, which is something which is hollow, with the added meaning of a cup or a vessel. As I showed you with the depictions of Danae, she was inseminated with this vessel, the flying vessel, but the vessel was used to represent the ship. And we can see also then that the symbol then interconnects with the priestess, and this is a Roman depiction of a priestess, and she's holding what is a circular libation vessel. But the vessel, as I said before, is used to denote a seed receptacle, is also used to denote a ship, a shining ship, a shining wheel. So these are all metaphors or words to describe this phenomenon. So the same type of polymorphic symbolism is found all over the world, and I just want to show you this because it's not just found in the Semitic and the classical traditions, but we find it also in Japan as well. They're using the same type of encryptions and word games. So for example, and I took these photographs, at Ise Shrine in Japan, we have what is known as a Utsu no Fune. Now the Japanese word means a hollow tree, and the hollow tree therefore is shown dotted around the parameters of the temple. But the word is polymorphic, it has an additional meaning, it also means a hollow ship. Specifically, a hollow ship which in Japanese folklore relates to their versions of the Elohim or the angels, in which they argue that their own imperial lineage is derived from. And if you look at this depiction of the Edo print, you can see the similarity with a flying saucer. Now this predates photography. So you can see then that the Japanese, like the Greeks, are representing their enclosure of the temple with a boat or a vessel. So then the argument becomes, I think, very logical that if they're representing their temples with vessels, then surely some of these temples or structures are built upon these vessels. And I think that this is a very logical argument when you begin to break down the symbolism. This then brings us on to the subject of the flying saucer. So as I said before, in the Hellenistic and Greek traditions, the shield is used to represent a deity, is used to represent a vessel, but also skuos, which is the Greek word for a shield, it has additional meaning of a saucer. So when we refer to flying saucers, this is a very ancient word, and I would argue that, let's say, the release of the word in 1947 of a flying saucer, again, was released by the priesthood. This is the priesthood in the know, the Illuminati. Now, when we talk about the Illuminati, well, who are we referring to? Well, we are referring to, in the Arabic, the Akzari, the Brothers of Light. Now, of course, the Arabic is a corruption on the Aramaic name Akzari. The word Zari means an angel with the connotation of a visitor or an alien. So these are brothers of aliens. So the Illuminati, let's be under no pretense here that this is again referring to this occult tradition. So now that we've got some background information into the representation of the vessel, I want to finish the lecture then by looking at the penultimate signifier of the mysteries, which is the flying saucer, and in particular its representation within the Bible as a vessel that is found in the book of Acts of the Apostles, chapter 11, verse 1 to 18. And we're going to spend some time trying to really analyse this passage and trying to understand what this passage could actually mean, because this passage has been edited by the priesthood, and it's been edited in order to conceal esoteric information. So I'm going to read you this passage. It goes, "I was in the city of Joppa praying, and in a trance I saw a vision. A certain vessel descended as it had been a great sheet, let down from heaven by four corners, and it came even unto me. Upon the which, when I had fastened mine eyes, I considered and saw four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And I heard a voice saying unto me, Arise, Peter, slay and eat. But I said, Not so, Lord, for nothing common or unclean hath at any time entered into my mouth. But the voice answered me again from heaven, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. And this was done 3 times, and all were drawn up into heaven." So this is a very curious passage. In this citation then, I'm going to show that this is an early representation of a flying saucer. I know that it doesn't sound like it, but I'm going to be showing you that in actual fact, that the argument that this represents the phenomenon of a flying saucer is a very persuasive argument when you go into the linguistics. And we can see then that this vision, as it is termed by the priesthood, but this was not a vision, because in actual fact, the original Greek word means that he was stupefied. So, but anyway, there has been this attempt to represent this as a vision. But this aside, I want you to now... I want to look at some points, and it's worth now spending a little time to dismantle carefully the quotation from the book of Acts. The apparent connection between the Bible stories and their modern incarnation as a flying saucer is prescient. So the discussion or focus, therefore, shall be concerned with the use of the word vessel. And this, as it is shown, as it is a very problematic word, and therefore it's been edited out of the modern editions of the Bible. And this occurred in the late 60s and the early 70s. So as we can see then, let's have a look, in the modern translation in the 1960s, New International Version, this is the Church of England, their editors, they wrote, "And in a trance I saw a vision. I saw something like a large sheet being let down from heaven by its four corners." There's no mention of the word vessel, which is interesting because they're basing this translation on the King James edition of the Bible, and therefore they've just totally disregarded the Greek etymology skeuos, which is a vessel. And we'll go into this etymology in a moment. Also in the Jerusalem Bible, we're seeing the same kind of omission. The Jerusalem Bible typically is used by Catholics. So I fell into a trance as I was praying and had a vision of something like a big sheet being let down from heaven by its four corners. So in the modern translation, found both in the New International Version and the Jerusalem Bible in their interpretation of Peter's vision, the editors choose incorrectly to omit the word vessel, and it's worth pointing out, to quote Acts chapter 11 verse 5. So I just want you to draw back to the older original translation in the King James's Bible of 1611. "And in a trance I saw a vision, a certain vessel descend as it had been a great sheet let down from heaven by four corners." So then, well, what could this vessel be? Well, in order to discern the meaning of the word vessel, we have to go into the Greek. Now, the Greek word for what Peter saw is skeuos. Skeuos is translated as a bowl or a saucer. It's a polymorphic word. It also means a shield. So what he actually saw was a flying shield or a flying saucer. The terminology is related to scutatus, which is a foot soldier with a shield. Again, this would be indicative of the angelic host represented with a circular shield. And indeed, we find in this sculpture of this angel from Pompeii, again, this is working on visio-paranomasia, or visual puns. So we have the circular shield, which has a connotation of a vessel or a ship. We have the elephant's ears, but the ears are doubled with the wings of the angel. And of course, the angel with the tusk of the elephant corresponds with the seraphim. And the seraphim is depicted as horned, because in the Semitic there is a relationship between koron and keren. So the word radiant it's very closely related etymologically to a horn. So therefore, if you want to depict a shining seraphim or someone who is shining, you would use the signifier of the horn to represent a shining angel. So we see then that there clearly is this relationship with this angelic lineage connected to a shield. They are known as the Ben Sira, the son of a ship or a boat, a vessel. And so let's have a look. So to summarise then, so that we can get a grasp of what these symbols actually mean. To summarise, in the Bible, the representation of the angelic host is typically shown with a round shield, an emblem that signifies a saucer and is archaic of a vessel or ship. As I said before, the bloodline of the Illuminati, again, is typically represented with a shield, which, as I showed you in the last slide, has a connotation of this angelic lineage. But remember that the word angel in the Aramaic also means an alien, so we're dealing here with what is known as a parallel society, as found with the name Diogenes. His name means a separate race. So we're dealing here with a society that exists, it corresponds and it exists simultaneously. Now, in Peter's own admission regarding his own this object, he clearly describes it as an elliptical vessel, a vehicle that by modern definition would almost certainly be described as alien. The mention of the word vessel, more specifically a flying saucer, is missing in the modern English translation of the Bible. So that has been totally, the word vessel has been taken out. Now, I want to also look at the idea of the sheet and try and break down the symbolism of what the sheet is, because this mystery has been concealed for 2,000 years. So Peter continues with his vision. And he says, I was in the city of Joppa praying, and in a trance I saw a vision, a certain vessel descend, as it had been a great sheet let down from heaven by four corners, and it came even unto me. Now the Greek word orthon, which is a sheet or a sailcloth, is a polymorphic word. The sailcloth is used to denote an angelic sailor. As we said, they are typically represented with round or circular vessels. But it's a diptych paranamasia. It's a wordplay on the Aramaic root ophan, which is a wheel. And this would make sense because he's describing this as a saucer or a shield, and he's describing it as a wheel. He's using the original Aramaic term, which of course corresponds with the Ophanim, those belonging to the wheels, the circular ones. So we can see then that the depiction is clearly of a flying saucer, and this has been edited out of the Bible. So Peter, therefore, by using the Greek expression orthon, which is a sailcloth, is encoding the common Aramaic noun ophan, a wheel, a term descriptive of the Ophanim and their host, the angelic host. As I said at the beginning of the lecture, Yahweh Sabaoth is connected to Sevet, which is a crew, and Teva, which is an ark. Now, for his Hellenistic audience, Peter uses the common Greek noun skuos, a shield or saucer. As I said before, the shield is connected to a deity and is connected also to a boat or a vessel. Thus, literally, a flying saucer. So, in other words, this is a vessel, which the apostle utilizes to describe the descending host. According to Peter's narrative, the angelic vehicle is compared to a seed receptacle. As we mentioned in the middle of the lecture, we said that the angels typically, in the Babylonian and in the Hebrew traditions, they would represent these angelic vessels by different types of measurements, seed measurements, which were used to designate these vessels. So different volumes would correspond to different types of vessels. They could be represented as barrels, receptacles, containers, vessels, ships, shields. We need to be very fluid in our thinking when we're looking at symbology. So the determinant of a four-legged animal, so let's look at this then. So I want to now just go on to the next part of the quotation, which talks about his vision of actually seeing animals. And as I said before, the connotation here is of a seed receptacle. So Peter mentions, he states, upon the which when I had fastened my eyes I considered and saw four-footed beasts of the earth and wild animals and creeping things and fowls of the air. So again he's making reference to the fact that this is a seed container. And as I said before, the word Ophanim in the Aramaic has this connotation of ephah, which is an angelic vessel. It's mentioned by the prophet Zechariah as a type of angelic vessel, but is also used to denote a type of basket or receptacle which contains seed.
Now, the determinant of a four-legged animal in Peter's narrative is another interesting piece of information that requires further explanation. In the classical Greek, the noun tetrapod, a quadruped, is used generically to denote fodder, in particular animals that are captured. And this is important. Let me emphasize this. These are captured animals. Thus, tetrapod is most commonly employed when discussing domesticated animals, particularly the cataloguing of livestock or property. Presumably, Peter utilizes the expression tetrapod to stress that these are common animals from the fields that have been caught or taken by the host. And this is important because if we go back to the passage, he has this conversation with the Elohim, and the Elohim ask him to make a sacrifice. He says, well, these are unclean animals. The connotation originally was that he thought that these were the daemons or the jinn. He didn't trust what he was seeing. He was saying, these are not holy animals. These have been stolen from the field. So he was not trusting what he was seeing. He was also seeing what would traditionally be described as a flying saucer. So then, to reiterate then, this host is circular, and it's represented in the original Greek as a flying saucer. So I want to now look at the translation of Acts of the Apostles, and this is I've translated this, and I went into all of the etymologies, and I had to go into both the Latin and the Greek, and it took quite a long time to actually construct together this translation. But this is something like what it would read from the original Greek. So Peter himself, he said the following. He said, I was in the city of Joppa, and upon my arrival I said a short prayer before the Spirit. Astonished and bewildered, quite beside myself, I stared in wonder and watched a saucer-like vessel descend. So there's no mention of a vision here. He's quite dumbfounded by what he's seeing. And those belonging to the saucer stepped down. This vessel descended and came near to where I stood. In the form of a great Ophanim, as I said before, he's making a correspondence between Othon, which is a sailcloth, and the wordplay Ophan, which is a wheel. So this is really a codified discourse to refer to a wheel, which is another word used in the Greek to refer to a saucer. Like a great large tessellated sail, again the sailboat or vessel connects in the Greek with a vessel. Thus, as I said, there's this relationship between opolon, which is a shield, and pleon, which is a ship or a vessel. Theos, a god, thurios, which is a shield. So, in the form of a great Ophanim, like a wheel, like a tessellated sail, I sent down from heaven by 4 archangels. Now, the word here is an archon. So the archons, as I said before, are related in Greek to olkas, which is a type of large ark. And the etymology is used. It informs the word ark, which we would use to describe Noah's Ark, which is a type of seed receptacle. Hence, within the symbology, Peter is seeing what is represented as a receptacle which contains seed. So he sees these archons or rulers, the word arcane, which is to rule. Upon the spectacle I fixated my eyes in awe, and perceived before me 4-footed beasts of the earth, itemized livestock. So in other words, these have been taken from the field, hence Peter's disbelief at the descending host. He's quizzing the host. I think this dialogue has been redacted from the Bible. There are contradictions within the text which show to me that it's been clearly heavily edited. But anyway, itemized livestock, including also wild beasts, dragons, reptiles. These are references to the gods, of course, because the seraphim are the shining ones, Serapha, which is a flame. As we said before, Theos, a god, is related to Phos, which is light. In the Aramaic, Erin, which is a watcher, also denotes a shining one, and the Erin are identified with the Elohim. They are the high ones. The high ones are described as living creatures that are connected to a vessel or to the wheel, specifically the Ophanim. So he's saying that I saw wild beasts, dragons and reptiles, and winged animals of heaven. So in other words, he's seeing something which is not human. And I heard a voice saying unto me, Arise, Peter, slay and eat. But I said, Not so, for nothing common or anything that has been raised down from heaven or debased at any time has entered into my mouth. But the voice answered me again from heaven, What God has raised accordingly before you as a sacrifice, call not that common. And this was done 3 times, and all was suddenly drawn up again into heaven like a seed-carrying basket. And behold, automatically before me there were 3 men already come into the house. And the Spirit invoked me immediately. So again, we've got a reference here to telepathic discourse. The Spirit is talking to him. To go with them, and thereby through my own judgment I discriminated accordingly. Moreover, these kinsmen accompanied me, and we entered into the man's dwelling, and he announced to us how he had seen an angel in his house. So that again we're seeing the correspondence between the saucer, the vessel, the ship, and this correspondence with the angel. And of course, as I said before, the Hebrew word malach, an angel, is polymorphic. It means malach, a sailor. Thus there is the relationship between Thaboth, which is the host, and Sevet, which is a crew of a vessel, Tevar, which is an ark. I want to just now spend the last, I've probably got about 10 minutes, and I'm going to just try and tie this lecture up and just sum up the lecture and try and make sense of what we've talked about today. So first of all, the lecture has looked into Skaphology. This is a word that I've come up with, skaph coming from the Greek root meaning a boat or a vessel. So it's the study of angelic vessels within the classical world. And this study is actually missing. It's a redacted tradition. It is a classical tradition. It is classified. As I said before, the word classical denotes something denoting the navy or naval. And as I said before, all these signifiers all refer to this angelic lineage, this lineage which has been concealed throughout history. So we mentioned then in the introduction that the classical tradition is an edited or a classified version of history and relates specifically to a concealed angelic lineage. Now the progeny describes a parallel society, one that coexists side by side with human society. So I would argue, whoops, it's just far off. Okay, so this describes a parallel society. Just bring it up. Sorry. Right, can you hear me? Okay. So this describes a parallel society, one that coexists side by side with human society. And as I said before, it's reflected in government. Gubernatios, to navigate a boat. In the Hebrew, we've got Shilton, which is government related to Satan, because the Shaitani are the opposers. So the governments are oppositional. They denote this angelic lineage, and of course relates to the Sultan. We said before there was a relationship in the Hebrew between Malach, an angel, and Melech, a king. In English, the correspondence would be kingship. So there is this parallel society, and Plutarch himself alludes to this parallel society in his biography, Parallel Lives. So angelic, this civilization, and as I said before, the word angelic also means alien, so let's not get confused with this language. So angelic, this civilization runs symmetrical and is at the heart of religion and culture. A political control structure, this contingent traditionally interacts or mediates with angels. Furthermore, the Skaphological tradition is veiled behind symbolism, in which much of history is based upon an allegorical tradition, allosagoria, or the talking, and the allegories likewise are historical. So sometimes something which is depicted as historical is allegorical, and vice versa. Now, according to Plutarch, this parallel column is represented as an offspring of a boat. As I showed with Diogenes, his name means a separate race. He is depicted with a barrel. The barrel is used to denote an angelic vessel within the Arcane tradition. It's very similar to a type of lamp, which in the Arabian traditions is correlated with the jinn. So the term is used to distinguish an angelic lineage, one which is separate or collateral to humanity. So the encodings, as I said before, are encoded within government. Now, the fact that the visitors live amongst us have impacted human life, and if we look at the evidence, the collision between the two groups has, for the most part, been very negative or at the very least problematic. And so we see that many of the wars which have been fought, let's say, for example, the symbology of Jesus, the big one in theology was he a Ben Adam, was he a son of man, or was he a Ben Elohim, the son of the gods? A lot of people died over this issue, and it still has not been resolved today. So in the lecture, I've also shown that the question whether aliens exist becomes a meaningless and obsolete argument when reviewed in context to the historical data, and shows a lack of critical discrimination. Rather, the main contention of the debate is not so much whether aliens are visiting Earth, but how much influence are non-human entities exerting over human lives. I think this is a very critical question. It's also important to note that we cannot have a full understanding of the UFO problem without factoring in the occult or parallel tradition, and I think that this has sadly been lacking within ufology, and so far, therefore, our understanding of ufology has been very limited. As I've argued before, it's encoded in languages, but it's not just encoded within one single language, it's encoded in multiple languages. So we need to look at the UFO problem. We also need to look at it from a linguistic perspective. And it can be argued that ufology in general has been very unsuccessful or limited in its search for meaningful answers, and is in part due to a lack of understanding or neglect concerning the Skaphological tradition. In other words, this is the missing piece to the puzzle. The Skaphological tradition does not exist within classics, and yet classics is all about naval vessels. So what is classics? No one's talking about these vessels. People might talk about angels, but they never mentioned the word vessel. Now, according to the clues within the classical record, the government, more specifically aspects of the government, are alien and consist of a parallel column. Confidential, the lid on this secret has been firmly placed, or should we say hermetically sealed, for thousands of years. Classified, this secret is the cause behind many of the wars that have been fought amongst men, including religious and political intolerance. Complete exposure will not come from the government, because the government are a part of this, and they've been concealing this information for thousands of years. So if we look into human history, we have also already seen that we've had limited admission. And I call this I call this partial disclosure, and this partial disclosure is thousands of years old, and it's there concealed within the symbolism, within the languages that we all speak. Fragmentary or incomplete partial disclosure is ancient and dates from when the records of man began. Encrypted, these revelations are veiled behind occult symbolism and are classified by the state. In other words, the term classified would have this connotation of this alien or angelic vessel. And I just want to finish on the final point then. So in conclusion then, there exists a political apartheid between the angelic offspring of the children of humanity, an inequality that is still being played out on the world stage. The final hurdle then is to reunite our species, to live in peace together, and to create a fair and just society in which the children of mankind can flourish. Ultimately, to take our rightful place with the gods as co-creators and equal participants, which we, of course, are not, on this beautiful blue planet we call our home. Thank you very much.